The calculation engine is so important to FileMaker that I want to demonstrate it by showing you the number of places the calculation dialog appears. As we see where the calculation engine is used, I'll also discuss how it's different in each place. To do this, we're going to go and create one of the templates here, just the contact manager. I'll put it on the desktop. And there's our simple contact manager. We're going to go into Manage Database because this is the first place people think of when you talk about calculations. And there's some in here already, but we're going to create a new one called Test. Change it to Calculation Type. Hit Create. And you can see we have the calculation dialog here with the fields down the side. You can, of course, change tables if you want. You have the operators. You have the functions. You can type the functions in here if you want, and it'll allow you to choose them from a list. So it's kind of like a type ahead. You can change result here. You can choose the number of repetitions. Typically, this is not a good idea because repeating fields aren't good for structure, but we still use them occasionally. You have a checkbox here to determine whether you want to evaluate if the fields are empty or not. You even have storage options. And we got to get rid of this to go into storage options. The calculation has to be valid to get in here. And you can say use global storage, do not store calc. There's a lot of stuff in here. I'm not really going to go over this right now because that's not really the focus here. The focus is programming calculation functions. We'll get to some of the stuff as we go around, through the examples as they're needed. If we need to do not store, we'll discuss that then. But right now, I just want to give you an overview of how much the calculation engine is used. So there's one place, right? That's a pretty common place. If you go to a text field or a number field or a date field or any field that can be entered, you have options as well where you can auto-enter a calculation. You can auto-enter a lot of stuff, but one of the options is auto-entering a calculation. Now notice it doesn't have all the same options. Sure, it has the fields down here, it has the operators, the functions, but it always must be text. That's because this field is a text field. It governs what the result type is. Okay, so remember what the differences are. There's no options in here. So you got to understand each dialog is a little bit different because each result is different. You can use a calculation engine in so many different ways, as we'll see as we're going through here. You also have the option to do validation by calculation right here. Similar dialog, but see, it must be Boolean, true or false. In FileMaker, Boolean or true is 0 or 1. Or actually, I should start with what's false, 0 or empty. Any other value is going to be true. -1, +1, 14,782.92 is true. Everything's true except for 0 and 1. Okay, let's go into layout mode and show you where we have some other types of functions. The first one I think of is conditional formatting. You can see some actually here. So let's take a look at this conditional formatting. You can see the little badges here attached to them. So we'll come in here, go to conditional, and they have a condition in here. A formula says if the first name is empty, then turn the text gray. Simple. It just formats. You can format a bunch of stuff based on the result of the calculation. So you can see that the calculation result must be Boolean, so it's a lot like a validation. It's either true or false. If it's true, it does the formatting that you see down here. If it's false, it doesn't do the formatting, leaves the object as is. Pretty simple stuff, pretty easy stuff to work with. Then we'll come over here and look at our hide object. This is one of my favorites. It's under the inspector, so if you don't have the inspector showing, you have to go and click this little pane here. And if you're in FileMaker or earlier version than FileMaker 17, you'll see a little inspector option right in here that you can open up a floating palette. But since FileMaker 17, it's been attached to the right side. And then you have 4 choices here. So we're going to go over to this last choice. You'll see hide object when. Now, before we go into the calculation dialog, make sure you see apply in fine mode. If you don't check this, it won't apply it in fine mode. And sometimes you want that to happen, sometimes you don't. So you can write an entire formula that has a Boolean result, and if it's true, it hides the object. If it's false, it doesn't hide the object. You can see how useful that can be. You can make conditional objects, buttons, text, anything, portal. You can make anything conditional based on whatever formula you can put in here. Then we have placeholder text, which is right up here. So we need to make sure we have a field selected. And you'll see that we have a very similar formula here. Now the calculation result must be text because it puts text inside of the field when it's empty. So you don't have to have a field label. So it's not quite maybe as useful as hide object, or let's say have as many uses, but the one thing it can do, which is hide, make those labels hide once the data is filled in, saves you a lot of screen real estate and can be very helpful. You can even put instructions right inside the field if you want. Then if we go back to the first tab on the inspector, you'll see we have tooltips, and they've already added one, a very simple one, doesn't have to be complicated, that simply pops up the name company when you hover over that object. But you can use any one of these functions to produce complex tooltips that pop up when you hover over to help people use your solution. Let's go into scripting. I can't even begin to cover all the places where scripting uses the calculation engine, so I'll use two. We'll do the if statement here. Click on this little formula here, and you'll see you get that same dialog. With the case of the if statement, its calculation result must be Boolean. So it's very similar to a lot of stuff. So once you start learning how to get a Boolean result, you can apply it in different places. Now if we put in set field here and go into the formula, we'll see the calculation result must be text. Well, that's because we haven't specified anything. Let's specify a target field like photo. Now it must be container because we're setting a container field. So if I put a date field, it would say it must be date, and so on. But other than that, it's really basically the same as everything else. So you still have to have that kind of result. So again, I could go through many, many examples. I mean, insert calculator results, set field by name, replace field contents. They all have the calculation dialog, but you get the idea. So we'll revert all and close that. Now we'll go into our custom functions. Now, custom functions are pretty cool because they allow you to centralize your code. Now, this is a very, very different looking dialog. You actually get to name your function, whatever you want, give it whatever parameters you want, call those parameters wherever you want, and we can make any formula you want here using what you have over here as far as the functions. So I can put in left, double click on the field, and put a 1. So I'll get the first character. I'm not even using this formula here, but you'll get the idea in a second. I can click OK, and if I go back into Manage Database and come into a formula, and let's say put in my name of my function, there it is right there. It's now using that code inside the custom function. So what's the benefit here? Because it's the same stuff you can do here. Well, you can call this code with a simple function name and parameters. Very easy to do. And if you make a change to the centralized code, it goes out to wherever you're using it. So you don't have to find every place you've applied that same code if you have it in a custom function. So it's very useful. But again, the key here is that it has a very different looking calculation dialog, but it uses the same calculation engine. Same is true for custom menus. These are great. I use them on every solution that I create. If we come over here and create a custom menu, and I'm not going to go over them, but basically the idea is that custom menus allow you to have any kind of menus you want up here at the top, change the menu items, delete them, remove them, have them run scripts, have them say something different. I mean, it's truly, you can customize the menus to meet the solution that you're designing. If you don't want them to do a delete all records, just take it out. It's as simple as that. If you want the find menu item to do your find script instead of what the normal find is, great, do that. And you'll find out when you go in there and you start working with this stuff that you can put all kinds of calculations. You can override the title, you can override the item name, you can do a bunch of stuff. But here's where that calculation comes in. You can come in here and say, look at my layout name, and if it says contacts on the first word, call this, undo contacts or something like that. Very, very useful. And then we have, of course, everybody's favorite, or at least every developer's favorite, the data viewer. I kind of like to call this, at least the right side. The left side is used for the script debugger, but the right side, I call this a cocktail napkin, where you can try out calculations, move through the records when you're in browse mode, see how the solution, the results change. So for instance, we can come in here and edit this one. We'll say left first name, semicolon 1. And let's say it's more complicated. It's obviously not, but let's monitor it. Let's go into browse mode. And you can see right here, if I create a new record and then type in the person's name, let's go ahead and do a new record here. Obviously, I don't know how to use this. There we go. We'll do it from here. I don't know how to use this template very well. Thought it would be easier, but it wasn't. And you can see how it's getting a J there. Now, if I put ida on this one, you can see how it's getting an A. And I can go to this record and say, oh, that's getting that result. That one's getting. So you can go through sample data without having to create something in managed database as a calculation field or create a script and run it. It's much easier to troubleshoot it here. And then last but not least, I want to go into security, because there's some options in here. We're going to go into our advanced settings, create a new privilege set, go into custom privileges on the records, come into any one of these, and you'll see that we have the ability to do limited on view, delete, and if I put yes, you can do limited on edit as well. They're all the same calculation dialog. Basically, it puts a calculation on that record, whether you can edit it, view it, or delete it. So the common scenario is when somebody creates a record, you put their account name on there and you check in here to see if the current account equals the count on the record, and then they can't view it if they don't have access to it. That would be salespeople who don't want to share their contacts and things like that. So hopefully this helps you to understand how ubiquitous, how pervasive the calculation engine, how important it is to FileMaker. And when you learn this, you can take all these different features and apply them. And in scripting, for instance, you can make it do much more than what scripting can do without the calculation engine. So hopefully I've convinced you it's a great, great feature or area of FileMaker to learn in order to increase your capabilities in development.